Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to bring even more NBA trade deadline predictions. In this video, we're going to be covering the Memphis Grizzlies, which I think is such an underrated team to talk about ahead of the 2025 NBA trade deadline. They have access to all of their draft picks, they have tradable salaries, and they have a really darn good basketball team. Jaren Jackson Jr. having a career season. Ja Morant, there's been some ups and some downs this season, admittedly, but he's also still Ja Morant. He's a heck of a basketball player. Desmond Bane has had some of those marquee performances. They have some awesome young rookies, including Jalen Wells, of course, notoriously Zach Edey as well. So if you're a Grizzlies fan, first of all, you should be excited. And then secondly, you should be really stoked because of the potential at the trade deadline to make some things happen and shake up the NBA in a real positive way for the Grizzlies. Let's jump into that video preview here now. I have three predictions in today's video for the Memphis Grizzlies ahead of the 2025 NBA trade deadline. Now, very important to note, these predictions can range from very specific trades, we'll even look at a specific trade in this video, to maybe some trade targets or organizational goals that will make sense for the Grizzlies and their front office to abide by as it comes to fruition at the trade deadline here. That might be luxury tax related. That might be first apron related. For the Grizzlies, you'll see exactly what I mean here at prediction number one. And then this is a super important reminder. I will be live on the channel the entire week of the NBA trade deadline. You're seeing this on Sunday. Guess what? On Monday, I'm going to be live on the channel. You're going to want to be there so you don't miss out on all of the trade coverage that you need to see, talking about all 30 NBA teams. So for my Grizzlies fans, first of all, you should be stoked. Let me know down in the comment section below, how long have you been a Memphis Grizzlies fan for? I'm going to leave little hearts on all of those comments. And also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Lets me know I'm doing a good job here at Utility Sports with all the work and effort I'm putting in for the trade deadline. Let's get into it now with prediction number one. The Memphis Grizzlies will stay below the luxury tax line. And for some Grizzlies fans, maybe there was a little bit of a sigh there of, oh, not again. The Grizzlies are currently $1.8 million below the luxury tax. They have a lot of flexibility going into next year. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s contract's actually descending. They have a couple of players who will be off the books that are currently on the books right now, one of them being Luke Kennard. The Grizzlies have ways to finagle money both now and long term, but I think staying below the tax line is extremely important for this organization. And my reasoning for that is they've only paid the luxury tax twice. Once in 2002, the 2002-2003 season, their first year in Memphis, and then also the 2005-2006 season, which was the last time they have paid the luxury tax. So with everything considered here, with all things in mind, even though the Grizzlies are a team that you would want to theoretically push your chips in, be a tax team, really try and upgrade this roster, we have good historical data and evidence that the Memphis Grizzlies likely will not do that, and that they might try and operate within the budgetary restraints of being a non-tax team. Now, there are some golden, or maybe silver linings here for Grizzlies fans. 7 of the last 22 NBA champions have been non-tax teams. 3 of those 22 that did win, 3 of those 15 champions that were tax teams were within $1 million of being below the tax. So you don't have to be this huge, ginormous spender to be an NBA champion, but it definitely helps. And I think for the Memphis Grizzlies, if you're a fan of this team, it might be a little frustrating where your team, your ownership hasn't really gone above the tax frequently, hasn't stayed above the tax, despite having some really good teams. You think about the Marcus Gasol, Tony Allen, Mike Conley, Zach Randolph era of Memphis Grizzlies basketball. Those teams were fantastic and really fun to watch. And now this team as well, with Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane. It's a different kind of team, a different iteration of Grizzlies basketball, of course. But again, another team that if they made a run to the Western Conference Finals, it wouldn't be shocking. It wouldn't be crazy to see that happen because of how talented this roster is. So if you're a Memphis Grizzlies fan, I want to know, how frustrated are you that your team hasn't spent the tax for almost 2 decades now at this point in time, which is just absolutely crazy. Prediction number 2, the Memphis Grizzlies will use Marcus Smart's salary as the foundation of a sizable trade. Now, here's where Memphis has a little bit of room for flexibility and optionality. I've talked already about the Grizzlies not wanting to exceed the luxury tax, which means they're not going to increase their current roster pay by more than $2 million. They will not enter the tax in that way, in my estimation. But they do have Marcus Smart's nearly $21 million salary to use in other trades around the league. And this is where having a bigger contract like Marcus Smart, a player who, yes, he's good, he's been a beneficial player throughout the majority of his NBA career, the Grizzlies can upgrade on him. They have draft assets, they have a bunch of their own pick capital, they have an extra couple of swaps as well, and I believe 2026 and 2029 to work with. The Grizzlies are absolutely loaded with assets to play with and tools to work around with. And because of that, Marcus Smart might be a guy who is looked at as expendable. And it's a real benefit having a big contract like this that you're ready and willing to move on from at the trade deadline because of the ability it gives you to go target other big contracts, other sizable contracts around the NBA that you could view as upgrades. Now, I think the wing spot, you're looking at maybe a starting level small forward. While Jalen Wells has been absolutely awesome as a rookie, I think going into the postseason, having a little bit more stability and having a player who maybe instead of just being an awesome role player, a guy who fits into your lineup, having someone who maybe stands out in a positive way in your starting lineup as kind of a go-to or kind of third option in kind of unison with Desmond Bane might be a huge benefit for Memphis. Or you could look at the center spot. Now, listen, Jaren Jackson Jr. obviously has been tremendous both offensively and defensively this year. Zach Edey, I think they're long-term optimistic about what he can become. My pre-draft comp was a bigger but slightly slower, less talented Ivica Zubac, and I think that's a very good comparison in a positive way for Zach Edey. If you look at what Zubac is doing this year for the Clippers, that was a pretty glowing comparison in my opinion. And I think there's a role that Edey can fill long-term in this league, in that kind of drop coverage, protect the paint, and also be a firm roll man to the rim. That's what you're hoping you get out of Edey long-term if you're Memphis. But what I do think right now is there are some limitations to what Memphis will likely look to do at the center spot because of that, but they could realistically target one if they wanted to. Now, they do have Brandon Clark, they have Luke Kennard, they do have guys who are good rotation players. It's also important to note they did not pick up the team option on Jake LaRavia, which maybe is another asset that you could throw into a Marcus Smart trade, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But again, I think the framework, having this Marcus Smart contract to utilize, to incorporate into trades is extremely important, extremely valuable. And for the Grizzlies on paper, with Luke Kennard being your go-to movement shooter, I would want them to have more shooting. I want them to have another player who's elite off the catch. And I think that's one of the big questions in the NBA right now, and something that not everyone understands. Having off-ball players is super extremely valuable, and there's a significant difference between the standstill catch-and-shoot three-point shooters and the guys who operate off of movement or can attack closeouts, can catch and rip and go, and make plays off of a live dribble. And I think that's the specific area I want Memphis to get just a little bit better at. If you're looking at ways to marginally or significantly improve this roster, I think even though Jalen Wells has been awesome, there are players out there who would be pretty meaningful, significant upgrades for this season, for this playoff run. And with the state of the Western Conference right now, while Oklahoma City looks incredible, this might be the most vulnerable they are for years because Holmgren and Hartenstein don't have any chemistry together yet. We'll see how that playoff tandem works. I think it's going to be pretty good because they're both awesome players, but they haven't played together yet. The Thunder are projected to stay together for a long time. The Nuggets look semi-vulnerable this year. There's flaws within every team just a little bit. And I think for Memphis, if you just sit on your laurels and you wait and you wait and you wait, you might never be able to strike at some point. I remember, 3-4 years ago, people saying, well, the Grizzlies should be in no rush. They're going to win. They've got so much young talent when they were talking about Ja and Jaren and Bane. And while, yes, that was a really safe philosophy and obviously one that has benefited the Grizzlies in terms of their overall continuity and team building, at some point you do need to step on the accelerator, especially trying to win an NBA championship. It's so hard to only win a championship by drafting and developing. And you look at the course of NBA history, the Golden State Warriors obviously notably added Kevin Durant when the salary cap jumped. You think about the Cleveland Cavaliers. They signed LeBron James back when they had Kyrie Irving, and then they traded for Kevin Love. There have been so many examples throughout NBA history where to win a championship, you need to be great in all three facets. You need to draft great, you need to sign free agents great, and you need to trade great. And it's very, very hard to do. The Grizzlies already nailed the drafting part. They do such a good job drafting players, and I think a lot of that, again, falls back to the coaching. Taylor Jenkins finds ways to put these guys in successful situations frequently, which is, again, part of why the drafting looks so good. They've made some smart trades. They've been aggressive in some ways. The Marcus Smart one hasn't necessarily panned out, I think, the way a lot of Grizzlies fans wanted it to, but they still have the opportunity ahead of them to make a big move because they have their draft picks still available and this Marcus Smart contract to work with, which is why a huge Cam Johnson acquisition is prediction number 3 for me in this video. They have multiple different ways of getting to a deal, but this is the way that I think makes the most sense for all parties involved. Cameron Johnson to the Memphis Grizzlies for Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia's expiring contract. Remember, the Grizzlies did not pick up the option on him, which was pretty surprising in my estimation, but now gives Brooklyn a little bit of flexibility. If you look at the Nets right now, they have 11 expiring contracts. Making this trade would make it 12 expiring contracts. The Nets are poised to work with cap space, so this is already a decent start. LaRavia is also a solid young player that is going to be relatively cheap, given the restrictions on his new contract that he's going to be forced to sign if he signs with the team that has bird rights on him. So Brooklyn's in a pretty good spot here if they do get Jake LaRavia to keep him on a cost-controlled deal. And then they get 2 first-round picks, one in 2025 and one in 2027, and 2 second-round picks as well. So you're getting that 2+ first-round pick compensation. You're getting a former first-round pick in Jake LaRavia. You're getting Marcus Smart's salary, which becomes an expiring salary next year. The Grizzlies cut down 1 year of their contract from Cam Johnson to Marcus Smart. They cash in on Cam Johnson having a career season. Now, listen, the Nets might not want that 2025 first, but what I really think here is maybe you figure out some kind of 3-team composition where this 2025 first gets routed somewhere else for something else down the road. And I think for Brooklyn, asset management, asset collection is what really makes the most sense for them. This is a good start to that, getting 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a young player. Now, you could argue, does more have to be involved? What kind of picks are included? Could it be 2026 and 2028 instead of 2025 and 2027? That could theoretically make some sense. It wouldn't necessarily hurt Memphis's long-term flexibility too bad because after the draft this year, the 2032 first-round pick becomes tradable. So the Grizzlies, if they traded 26 and 28, could look at using 2030 and 2032 in other deals if they wanted to make something happen. Obviously, the Grizzlies have a lot of trade flexibility right now because they own all of their own future picks. But if something doesn't materialize for Cam Johnson, DeMar DeRozan might be the fallback plan, the fallback option, if you will, for the Memphis Grizzlies. Given the De'Aaron Fox situation ongoing right now in Sacramento, a complete retooling might occur for the Kings. Maybe something like Brandon Ingram could be involved in that. And I think the overlap between DeMar DeRozan and Brandon Ingram is pretty stark and substantial. So depending on what ultimately happens in the De'Aaron Fox sweepstakes, DeMar DeRozan might want out of Sacramento. And if he does, he would want to play on a contending team. He's on a pretty cost-controlled contract himself. And I think this is one of the substantial differences in a trade for Cam Johnson or DeMar DeRozan compared to Jimmy Butler. You trade for Jimmy Butler, he wants an extension. The reason Jimmy Butler continues to say he doesn't want to play for Memphis is because the Grizzlies are not willing to pay the tax. The Grizzlies have about $30 million of space until the tax next season. Jimmy Butler wants a lot more money than $30 million. You can squeeze Cam Johnson in, you can squeeze DeMar DeRozan into your cap sheet next year without entering the tax, and because of that, they make a lot more sense in Memphis than a guy like Jimmy Butler does. Even though Butler's probably the best player of the 3, Cam Johnson's having a career year. He's a tremendous off-ball player who shoots the 3 really well, and then DeMar DeRozan might be another half-court initiator for their offense come playoff time if they kind of pivot to a lesser option than Cam Johnson trade value-wise at the 2025 NBA trade deadline. So let's get to a bonus prediction. I promised you 3 predictions. Here's a 4th one. The Grizzlies salary dump John Konchar in a move. This is not a huge deal. John Konchar has not played in a huge number of games this season for Memphis. His field goal percentage and his 3-point percentage are all quite a bit down this season. He's just not having an effective, efficient year for his standards, but I don't think he's a terrible player. Now, the reason I think that the Grizzlies will ultimately salary dump him, he's got 2 years left on his contract after this season, and he's making over $6 million annually, and I've mentioned multiple times about the Memphis Grizzlies really not wanting to be a team that works with in the tax, does not want to be above the tax. Moving John Konchar at this trade deadline, including maybe 2 second-round picks to trade him to a team that has an expiring trade exception at the deadline, makes a lot of sense here. There's teams that either have room exceptions or flat-out cap space or trade exceptions that you can sneak John Konchar $6.1 million into. Maybe if you have to take back some other expiring salary or some other salary included, and you incentivize the other team to eat this contract. It's not really that big of a contract. The $6.1 million is not that big of a deal in the overall landscape of the NBA. But for Memphis, I think it's a more important deal than it would be for other teams because of their history of not paying the tax and the overall cap picture Jaren Jackson Jr. becomes extension eligible this offseason, and he's going to get paid, especially if he makes All-NBA. He's going to make a lot of money. So if Memphis is looking at their long-term cap sheet, dumping $6 million, again, it's not that much in the NBA world, but it might be the difference of being able to really retain all of their young core, with that being John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane especially. Trading John Konchar, probably just something the Grizzlies are going to have to bite the bullet on. Even though he's not a terrible player and his contract's not huge, I think trading him opens up more long-term flexibility for the Grizzlies instead of just flat out keeping him and him not really having a role on this present team as it currently stands anyway. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more NBA content. Please do not forget, we will be live starting on Monday, the entire week of the NBA trade deadline, all the way through Thursday, which is the actual day of the deadline. I am so excited, super stoked, and I know you guys are as well. Let me know in the comment section below if you plan on being there, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.